Why you should read Tales from the Gas Station book, review and explained. Book background. Hey there, this video will be the first in a series about the Tales from the Gas Station book series, explaining it and trying to give you a sales pitch on why you should read it. And after watching, if you enjoyed it and want to learn more about where to read Tales from the Gas Station, my timelines and canons video will be in a playlist and a link will be in the description when it gets released. Now on to the reason why you should read Tales from the Gas Station. Background. Tales from the Gas Station is a series of horror comedy stories written by the author Jack Townsend, who also goes by Gas Station Jack. On Reddit, the stories were originally written on r/NoSleep. This is where it won the 2018 Series of the Year award. The series was adapted into a novel series Volume 1 released on October 31, 2018, with the audiobook releasing on November 9, 2023. Along with this, it's been being adapted into audio by the YouTuber Mr. Creepypasta also since 2018, whose voices are the most iconic, which is unsurprisingly why he narrates the audio for audiobooks. However, much to my chagrin, he doesn't narrate the theatrical edition of the books, which is a shame, as I rather like these versions of the books apart from him not narrating them, of course. Now on to what makes Tales from the Gas Station an enjoyable and unique book series, as I feel like its uniqueness is one of the series' biggest strengths, which is mainly due to the narrative constraints of originally being posted to the r/NoSleep subreddit, where stories post on NoSleep must be in character, which is both a boon and a bane to the stories, as the narrative constraint of the stories being either blog posts, general entries of some variety or sort, maybe being found in a terminal of some variety, or a story you're being told in person. Due to this self-imposed need for a kayfabe, a lot of stories will take a sudden right turn to try and explain why and how this story is being posted to NoSleep. Examples like, why would a person that has achieved interdimensional godhood post their story to r/NoSleep, or why did the main character write a journal none of the other characters see? Then, in a near total non sequitur before a big finale, announce that they have a journal and give it to a random side character so they can post it somewhere. However, Tales from the Gas Station is an exaction to the trend of stories that lose their edge in needing the kayfabe, as it uses its narrative constraints masterfully to enhance both the comedy and intrigue. An example is how in the original version of the stories there's no part 4, and part 5 opens with Jack saying how he's sorry to anyone who read it and how it got taken down, and the FBI are working hard to delete any copies of it, and then he urges the readers to go to the hospital before symptoms manifest, and if they see a door with a crow emblem on it, not to open it. This is where the books come in, since it's not formatted as an in-universe blog. It includes things that give context to the events happening, like how the book depicts the events that happen in Chapter 4, which an element of becomes a recurring plot point throughout the series of. Another great example is Antonio/Carol's, who in the blogs is referred to as Carlos and mysteriously disappears after the end of the Dark God arc. But in the books, we both learn his real name, which is Antonio, which was a secret in the blog. We even learn where he got the name in the book and his fate, which I won't reveal as it's a pretty big spoiler. Or including vague references to the Dark God, who's reveled at the end of its arc to be, well, I mustn't say because spoilers. Now, it does seem pretty obvious that I have some contempt for the NoSleep rules, but it did create the proper environment for Tales from the Gas Station, as it's written like and inspired by a lot of creepypasta, and more specifically r/NoSleep stories. I mean, more than how it's forced to by the constraints of r/NoSleep's rules, like how it used and subverts a lot of tropes from r/NoSleep. Such as rules horror, which is a type of internet horror which uses a list of rules to guide your mind into imagining a monster scarier than they could depict. Like that one Japanese story that I think goes something like, my nighttime routine. I brush my teeth. I change into my pajamas. I lock the door. I close the windows. I feed my cat. I stretch. I close the window. I go to bed. Now, this doesn't seem scary, but like horror in general, it's like a joke. Where in jokes, if you use wordplay as part of the joke, is letting the person being told the joke figure out the punchline themselves, much like the story above, where you're supposed to figure out on your own that a creepy crawly of some variety crawled through the window. Now, this section makes it sound like I have a very positive view on the writing quality of creepypasta and rules or list horror in the case of the story above, but most of it is slop. I mean this in the kindest manner possible, which is that most of it is low effort or made by people who don't understand the general rules. I personally find the most scary within the subgenre. I should add that when I say rules, I'm not saying any story with rules or list horror has to follow it, but most people that write it generally try to do it by copying stories they like, which there's nothing wrong with, but they don't understand it enough to know why it scares them, which even with normal horror is true as well. So I tend to cut the authors a little slack, and I think you should too. But I've dilly-dallied enough. Moving on to plot structure. But needless to say, this isn't the only thing about the books that are good, as the book's character writing and plot structures are fairly unique while not feeling forced. The structure is most evident in the early series but is in the whole series nonetheless. To describe said structure is difficult but can best be described as a handful of seemingly disconnected subplots that go along simultaneously. Such as in Book 1, which has the hand plans, Spencer the Keepers, the Dark God, the Gnomes, and Jack digging when he zones out in the trees. And while most of these plot points all seem disconnected, by the end of the arc most of them connect seamlessly in a very satisfying way. Such as how it's revealed that Kiefer, the hand plants, the trees, and Spencer, who are all working for or created by the Dark God or are the Dark God. Now what makes this narrative structure intriguing is because the story is structured into chunks. This is because originally being Reddit posts, they weren't that long, so each of the parts progressed both the overall story but also each subplot, which means once you've picked up on makes reading the books an interesting mystery to figure out what subplots or events will feed into the greater narrative, and what's just there for atmosphere, like the gnomes, which aren't connected to the Dark God, they're just there. Or like the Akiaks, which are book exclusive but are what was behind the crow emblem in part 4. But the best part of the series are probably the characters. The characters in the series are fairly uniquely written. This is because, to the best of what I can surmise, the series was not intended to run as long as it has. More specifically, what I mean is characters, which I'll talk about in sections to avoid confusion, fit certain archetypes when introduced, like say a joke character who then sticks around as the story becomes more serious, who then needs to evolve to fit the tone of the story. With that being said, I'm now going to move on to the character analysis. Jack is the main manifestation of weirdly written characters. This is seen in his almost entirely reactionless attitude to a lot of the things in the story, and being incredibly reactionary in terms of the narrative. This can be seen in how the entire first book he doesn't go out of his way to investigate nearly anything. This is because originally being akin to an anthology where a blank slate POV character was better for telling the story. But as it went on, Jack gained more defining traits like a love of books or his chronic insomnia, which both lets him remember events he shouldn't be able to, but also means he hallucinates and has a faulty memory. Yeah, you thought the unreliable narrator was just in the journal entries. Well, it's also in the books. Good thing is most of them are pointed out directly in later chapters or books in the series. Another thing that is both intriguing but also frustrating about him is his reluctance to talk to people about his feelings, backstory, or problems. This includes himself, since listening to his internal thoughts, it's evident he's very good at suppressing his intrusive memories, the non-visual ones anyway. This combined with his social ineptity, which is also the reason he seems to be blind to his own notoriety and universe, since in the supernatural community the name Jack Townsend is well known. This all together makes Jack both funny but also annoying to read, but only in the way that's intended when written. You know, the good kind. Anyway, I can't explain more without spoilers. So moving on to Jerry/Marlboro. Jerry started off as one of the subplots and as a nearly purely comic relief character, could be summed up as crazy cultist in the woods, who loves Marlboro cigarettes and is thus nicknamed as such. But then he stuck along for the ride, where he stays for the most part as comic relief. But it's evident that even if not obvious, he does progress. In small ways anyway. The most obvious way being how his gag evolves. From at the begging, his joke being how he's a crazy cultist in the woods of love cigarettes, to how he's used as a general tool for plot progression, since his main gag evolved into his hyper-competence. But then again, describing him as a tool does a bit of a disservice to his character, since well, he has so much of it, and saying he doesn't have an arc doesn't mean he doesn't change, like I said before. It's just because we don't see things from his perspective. And I won't spoil the one time we do hear things from his direct perspective. You'll need to read volume 4 for that. But overall, this makes Jerry hilarious to read, but some may feel like he's better used in short bursts, which luckily he is used in for most of the series. However, Jerry does have a, albeit rare but meaningful, few serious moments, like at Vanessa's funeral, where he gives a eulogy about mathematism, the cult he was a part of. And it's also obvious how the narrative takes itself more seriously when it talks about his addiction to the Russian radio, a magic omniscient radio which is first played as a joke about the heightened reality of the series, but is then taken more seriously as it continues, with Jerry repeatedly relapsing into use before breaking his addiction. Conclusion. Now of course there are other characters I could spend 10 times the length of this video talking about, but I'd either have to spoil important plot points or not do the characters justice. So I'll just cover them in other videos, which when they're out will also be in the playlist. Wink wink. Now thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed, hit like and subscribe to my channel. I try to upload when I can, and any feedback is welcome. And make sure to have a wonderful day.